In July 2006, Talha Ahsan was arrested at his Tooting home in South London. Since then, he has been held in a maximum security prison, fighting extradition to the US, where he is accused of running extremist websites and supporting the Taliban. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to Absent Justice. I'm Asim Qureshi, and I will be your guest presenter for this week's show. American intelligence claims a so-called extremist Chechen website supported by Talha Ahsan helped fund terrorism. But Talha and his family say the accusations are baseless, and British intelligence officers say they have no interest in taking him to court here. He has now served the equivalent of a 10-year sentence at high-security prisons without trial, and if convicted, he could spend 70 years in one of America's supermax prisons. But before we discuss this case, Huri al-Haddad went to the Ahsan family home and sent this report.
In this small home in Tooting, South London, a family has spent the last 5 years in a state of uncertainty over the fate of their beloved son. Talha Ahsan was arrested at his home in July 2006 in response to a request from the US government. Since then, he's been held in a maximum security prison fighting extradition to America. Talha hasn't been charged by UK authorities, but the US accuses him of running extremist websites and supporting the Taliban, though the offences have never actually been clarified or proven. His father, Saeed Abu Ahsan, explains what happened on the day his son was taken.
20 to 25 police officers came, maybe in plain dress, and they surrounded all. This front door, back door, this door, that door, whatever they have, But they came in, and they're very, very polite, very, very gentle, there is no doubt of it. And my office in the front room, and they asked Talha to come. They started at 9 and that finished at 12, but they could not find anything out. So then they go. They search each and every corner, from garden to basement to loft, wherever they wanted to, they checked it. And the police officer was constantly with Talha, so that Talha may not escape.
The US alleges he was involved with extremist websites between 1997 and 2004, one of which was hosted on a server in America. Talha has also been accused of supporting the Taliban and having discussed the possibility of attacking naval targets in the Persian Gulf, though he denies all these charges. The accusations came as a shock to Talha's mother, Farida Ahsan. She says her son is very loving and couldn't imagine him condoning or supporting violence.
He's very kind to me, very much, because of my ill health. And when I used to use a wheelchair, and he used to tell me, "Mommy, I will take you park, and I will take you outing, and I will do all this thing." And many things, he always asked me. So I miss him very much.
Human rights campaigners have frequently condemned the case due to its use of secret evidence. Victoria Britton, a journalist and patron of human rights organisation Cage Prisoners, says it's important that more people make efforts to raise awareness about Talha's case.
All these cases about deportation are to some extent based on secret evidence, and I think it's a general principle that nobody should be tried on secret evidence. And I think it would be great if everybody who sees your program writes to the Home Secretary or to the Justice Secretary or to the Prime Minister about this case in particular, and say, why did he have to be kept in prison anyway while the case was going on? There was absolutely no way he was going to abscond, or any way that he was any kind of a threat to anybody. It's a really, really bad case.
Talha studied at Dulwich College and has a first-class degree in Arabic from the School of Oriental and African Studies. To his friends and family, he's known as a poet, and has even had a book of poetry published while he's been in prison. His mother says he frequently sends her examples of his work.
5 years ago, they brought me to a cell. And ever since, a waiting game plays here as they decide on sending me away. With parents growing sad and grey at home, how will they manage visiting me there? Or must they wait until the end of time? Ma, hear my oath by him whose hand is time. Birds stand in worship with me in the cell. So even if I am taken from my humble parent here, then tell them paradise is our true home, whose garden years will never fade away.
Talha is in the final stage of proceedings at the European Courts of Human Rights, and although the family is unsure of what the future holds, they're determined to remain optimistic that they'll soon be reunited with their son.
Well, joining me in the studio to discuss some of the issues raised in that report are Said Abu Ahsan, Talha's father, and Hamja Ahsan, Talha's brother. Welcome to you both.
Assalamu alaikum.
Talha is somebody that I know personally. I went to university with him. He's been a friend of mine for a very long time. And that report that we just saw really kind of highlights some of the kind of amazing qualities and characteristics that Talha has. You know, he is, anybody who knows him, anybody who knew in university or outside of it, knew him to be very kind. He was a very gentle person. You know, he was the last person you'd ever think that would be involved in terrorism. You know, he was somebody who's extremely, you know, well-educated and very thoughtful as well. I mean, you know, growing up, has he always been that way?
As a student, he was very bright. As a man, he was sincere, trustworthy, and very, very kind-hearted. He has always got the tendency how to help the people, how to help the neighbor. And he always look after us.
Talha was also, he's my older brother by 1 year. So, we grew up together. We had a fairly, normal childhood, played computer games together, played football together. And now he's gone. So you have Eid dinners and he's not there. And, my birthdays he's not there, and he's just absent. Or when I graduate, he's not there, and it's very, especially for my mother and father, because my mother's developed quite severe arthritis, so it's quite, she doesn't have that support there either. So.
I mean, obviously, we've seen a number of cases around the UK where a family member has been taken away. Can you describe what it feels like to effectively live in a household where there's one person that should be there who's no longer there with you?
Because without him, the family is not full. When you go to his room, and nobody is there, only books and books. He writes, and he writes a lot of stories. And he is also a writer, and he also writes the poet. And he's always, like to read the books. And you can see his library. Everywhere he has got books. His bedroom, we have got a library, it's full of books. And we have got a garage that is full of books. So we missed him on and go to his room.
Hamja, yeah, since July 2006, Talha has been in prison. What is it? Why have the UK government held him in prison for 6 years now?
I mean, when you say the case back to yourself, it just sounds more illogical and absurd. Why is a British citizen who's never ever been to America being held by America for something that allegedly took place in the UK, so just makes no sense. Sometimes I guess the government's just being abusive, and as a lot of people said, from Shami Chakrabarti to our local MP Sadiq Khan to Caroline Lucas of the Green Party, is fantastic. it's just unacceptable. You can just detain someone year after year after year after year. You know, because if you get a sentence, you count down to it. You know, you have something to look forward to. It's just this limbo or this black hole, and you're just stuck in it. It's just, I don't understand. Yeah, I don't understand sometimes myself.
Well, I mean, the latest that we know is that he has a case before the European Court of Human Rights. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, when do we expect a decision with that case?
Yeah, it's at the last stage of the European Court of Human Rights. His legal representative, Gareth Peirce, he's looking at whether certain conditions within America, such as, because as we just heard in the introduction, he'd be held 70 years in solitary confinement in a place called ADX Florence, which is described as a clean version of hell. Whether that violates conditions of European Court of Human Rights. Although in the European Court, they said there's an admissibility of it being looked at within the UK. So.
Okay, well, I mean, obviously we know that Supermax facilities in America are far worse than they are here in the UK. My own organisation, Caged Prisoners, has done a lot of kind of research into ADX Florence, Terre Haute, some of these kind of Supermax facilities which have sections that have really been made for Muslims now in order to kind of isolate them, to intern them for long periods of time. As you mentioned, you know, we've seen sentences go all the way up to 200 years plus. But there's something quite similar going on already to Talha here in the UK. I mean, he's not been charged with any crime, but he's been kept in effectively the equivalent of a Supermax in a high security prison here in the UK. And he's currently in Long Lartin, is that correct?
Yes. He's been in Long Lartin for a few years now. It's all the way in Warwickshire. It's actually the same prison Jerry Conlon of the Guildford Four was held as well. And he's in this prison within a prison, so they can't have mixing and with other prisoners or go to the library or the gym and other things. So yeah, he's had the equivalent of a 10-year sentence. And he's also been in Belmarsh, and they've moved him around the UK a lot. Once he was in, and often you're not told why they're moved around. And it's such a, you know, like he was in Manchester, that's impossible for us to travel to visit him. And then when they move back to Long Lartin, you have to, like, you know, get all your phone numbers again, and it's just such a, and you're not told why, and the family's not told why, even though it's quite distressing for them. So it's just, sometimes it's just irritating as well as being an ordeal.
Well, I mean, there have been studies in relation to group isolation, which the men in Long Lartin are currently in, that, you know, it has in some ways a worse impact than even, you know, being isolated by yourself, because of the fact that you're stuck with the same few people day in, day out. There's no change, and, you know, all sorts of problems can start to occur between those detainees. I mean, have you had any feeling from Talha that, you know, being in that kind of group isolation has been particularly traumatic?
Yes, I have. I think even Talha sometimes, you know, gets strength from his family and calling me every day, because you're just stuck with the same small handful of people for like over 5 years, and just drives you a bit mad, I guess. And even one of the people in the special extradition unit, who's probably the person most people wouldn't feel that sympathetic to, which is someone called Haroon. He actually went mad and was taken to Broadmoor. And whatever you think of his case, you know, he is a human being who deserves just treatment and humane treatment. And Talha was present actually when he actually broke down, and actually picked the Quran off the floor, you know, as he was being restrained. Sometimes, I think because I visit him with my family, so he, for the sake of my mother and my father, he probably keeps a bright face up, and partly because he's quite observant with his, when he prays. I'm sure it gives him a lot of strength. But it is just pushing someone to the edge. It's quite horrible. It's quite horrible for all of us. So.
Sayyid Abu Hassan, you know, going back to the case itself, Talha's been put on an extradition warrant from the United States. They say that they have reason to believe that, you know, he was involved in some kind of terrorist activity. You know, to what extent, you know, do you believe those accusations to be false?
The extradition law itself is unbalanced, and when there was Babar's case to, you know, discuss in the House of Parliament, but the House of Parliament did not agree. First, they gave it to the BBC, Backbench Committee. I was also in there, and they discussed all the day. And at last, they said, no, it must be discussed in the House of Parliament. Mm-hmm. And it had been discussed in the House of Parliament. And they say that it is a deformed law, so it will be a reform. So my point is that if it is a deformed law, then why Talha will be punished for the deformed law?
So you're effectively saying that, you know, regardless of whatever charges there are against Talha in the US, the actual extradition act itself, the legal mechanism that currently exists is incorrect in and of itself. That's what the Backbench Committee suggested.
Yeah. There also seems to be quite a cross-party consensus on this, or it's something that transcends. You know, recently in the news we've seen the Christopher Tappin case, this 65-year-old golf course owner who's, you know, now been extradited, and someone who's only 23, which is Richard Dyer. So this sort of, when you have a bad piece of legislation, it bites back. It affects everyone. It might have. It's not just Muslim community, it's British citizens as a whole, you know, it's just stupid.
But didn't they bring in the law for Muslims, really, to deal with, you know, Abu Hamza al-Masri, to have him sent over to the US?
Sure, and that, you know, I suppose, and, you know, and it seems to affect more people than that as well. So, yeah.
Okay, I mean, going back to the case again a little bit from a slightly different perspective, maybe. Here in the UK, you know, we have quite a large amount of counter-terrorism legislation. I mean, we've got various things that the UK government can do to prosecute an individual if they're involved in terrorist activity, whether it's glorification, preparation, even possession of terrorist material. Now, surely the UK government would have been interested in Talha if he had been involved in some kind of terrorist activity. I mean, they have enough legislation to prosecute him if he did. Why haven't they done so?
I wish I could answer that question.
No, they could not find any. They did search from 9 a.m. in the morning, and they finished at 12 p.m. So it means nearly 15 hours. And there were 25 officers or 30 officers there. They searched each and every corner, but they could not find any, so they could not get any material. In this country, he is innocent. The police has got no charge, and he's as a normal human being as somebody else.
Yeah, if Talha has done anything wrong, fine, put him in a British court of law and show the evidence. I mean, that you can put them all the way to another country in quite inhumane prison conditions away from their family and friends without, you know, prima facie evidence is absurd, you know. That's something Shami Chakrabarti said about the whole extradition treaty in the first place.
Now, we know of the case of Gary McKinnon. He was a hacker who, you know, allegedly hacked into US government websites Now, the British government has pretty much given an assurance of sorts to his family that he's not going to be extradited because of his Asperger's syndrome. But what we know of Talha is that, you know, he has Asperger's as well. So why hasn't the same guarantee been given to Talha that was given to Gary McKinnon? Or has it been?
No, the same treatment hasn't been given to Talha as, you know, the very high-profile case of Gary McKinnon. Sometimes on the front page of the Daily Mail, and I'm not an avid Daily Mail reader, you see the Gary McKinnon case, and the Times backs Christopher Tappin's case, and Gary McKinnon also has, you know, a lot of celebrity backing as well, and songs about him. But yes, if it's as you logically said, if they've both got Asperger's syndrome, then it should be applied to all citizens, you know. I suppose if you're Asperger's and, you know, you have a, you know, if you're from a Muslim background, maybe, you know, you're not treated in the same way.
And so what are you calling for as a family? You know, what kind of resolution would you like to see in this case, obviously other than, you know, Talha being freed and returned to you?
I think we'd all like to see a reform of the extradition law itself. I also show a lot of solidarity with Julia Dyer, the mother of Richard Dyer, who's always on Twitter, and there's a petition online for him, and I'd recommend everyone to sign that watching. And yeah, as we said, if, you know, nobody's above the law, if he's done anything wrong, give him a fair UK trial. British trials for British citizens, I think the slogan was at the time of lobbying for Baba Ahmed as well.
Yeah. And you've got a campaign going for him. There's a website as well as a Facebook and Twitter. You know, what are the details of your campaign group?
Yeah, there's actually a really good website with a very comprehensive amount of information, and his poems and poetry readings and all the news reports, and you can find that at freetalha.org. Talha spelled Talha, and that would have connections to the Facebook and Twitter. You know, if some guy called Coney can get 70 million, 100 million hits, you know, Talha's Facebook page can be spread, and
and it's the same name for the Facebook page.
Yeah, it's Free Talha, my son.
Okay. And
it's also on Twitter. So something as simple as that can show. You can, you know, spread, you know, unjust cases and.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what we want to encourage people to do. So yeah. It'd be great if people could go onto the social networking and the website. And unfortunately, that's all we have time for this week. I'd like to thank both my studio guests, the production staff, and you at home for watching. Remember, Absent Justice is a fortnightly programme, so make sure you tune in next time with Muazzam Beg. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.